Alright, welcome back to section 8 and schematics. This chapter is about schematics. Obviously, schematics are the blueprints normally that we use for Angular CLI. And of course, as a good citizen, NGRX, the library, is giving us schematics as well, so we can get help scaffolding the artifacts that you need to be successful, and most of all, not bored. In this video part, we'll talk about how to set things up, and we'll also take it for a spin so you have a good idea of how to use it. In this video, we'll talk about how tedious it actually is to create everything manually, such as reducers, selectors, injecting store services, set things up in either app module or the feature module. There's a lot of setup going on, and there's also a lot of file creation going on, and to be honest, this leaves at least me bored. Having to create all these things, the only thing I want to think about is building features. Then we'll have a look at how we can install everything we need and to set everything up so we're good and ready to just use our newfound library. Then we're going to actually take it for a spin. We're going to try out a few schematics, see how they work for us, see what kind of code they generate, so we have a good idea of where to go next and where to add our own code, the code that we actually want to write. Okay, now we're inside of VS Code. We have generated an Angular project. We have installed store module. We have also installed store DevTools module. But you can imagine that we can also install all the different things that we like as well, such as the entity library. What I want you to focus on here is inside of here, where we set things up. So here we would set different kind of states up. Right now we only have one state, but we can definitely have a bunch of those. Here you can see that we are setting up store DevTools module. If we're not in production, then try to instrument it. Then I want you to direct your attention to this inside of app here. And as you can see, customers have its own directory. Looking at this directory, we can see that it does contain component specific things. That's all well and good. That's things that we can scaffold with Angular CLI. That's not really a problem. However, looking at this, we see we got a customer actions file, we got a customer reducer file, we also got the customer selector file and a model file. Looking at one of these, for example, we see that we have created an enum for each and every CRUD action. We also see that we have created a class to make it simple to create these actions. As you can see, it's quite a bit to type, and obviously here at the end we got the union type. Moving on to the reducer, we can see that the reducer is using the customer actions, the union type, the type of action, and we can also see that the enum here helps us to make sure that everything is type safe, everything is nice, what we've come to expect from NGRX. Then of course we got the customer selector bit, which just exposes different selectors for different things, such as customer data, customer error, customer loading, and so on. Then we export all of these selectors, and inside of customer list component, we're able to use such a selector to select out the data that we need, or if we want to display some kind of error or what have you. So what's the problem here? The problem is that this is just one entity. This is just customer. Imagine that we have 5, 6, or 10 entities with what we're looking at here. 1, 2, 3, 4 possible files per entity. So we're talking in the vicinity of 20, 25 files easily. And then we got, of course, the one that's global setup, such as store module. But definitely if we got feature modules to set this up instead of a global for root, we would have another file in here. Problem is here that this is tedious. This is too much to type. And frankly, I don't know about you, but I want to spend my time doing other things than just typing out a lot of files or copy pasting them or whatever I'm doing. I want a tool to handle this for me. I want the ability to have this scaffolded. Alright, we are inside of the terminal. We are looking at an Npm Install where we have specified NGRX Store, NGRX Store DevTools, and NGRX Schematics. Now, Schematics is really the only mandatory one we need at this point. But imagine that this schematics library generates code meant for store or meant for DevTools, then the code won't actually compile after the code has been generated, if that makes sense. Yes, you can install schematics alone, but you definitely need the supporting libraries of the schematics blueprint that you mean to use. So for that reason, we're going to go with a bare minimum install, which is store DevTools, and of course the actual library itself, which is NGRX schematics here at the right. Okay, we have taken ourselves to the terminal. It's time to try to run our schematic. Our schematic looks like this: ngrx/schematics : store state root module and then app module ts. Now let's try to explain the syntax here. But what it's saying essentially is that it will set up the state, and it will do so in the app module ts file. And this will give us a bare minimum implementation and setup of the store and the state. So let's try to run the schematic and let's see what the effect is. We run this and it tells us what? It says it has created a file index.ts under a new directory called reducers, and it has also updated our app module ts. So let's head over to VS Code and see what actually happened. Okay, so we're inside of VS Code, and then what? Inside of VS Code here we can see that two things have been added, these two lines. So the first line here says store module for root. The other line says store DevTools module.instrument. So this means that it has set up both the store and the DevTools module conditionally based on whether we are in production or not. So that much for the update. However, meta reducers, where do these come from? Well, they come from a directory called reducers. Reducers itself has a new file that it created called index.ts. Now index.ts, on the other hand, comes with some interesting scaffolded code for us. It comes with an interface state that we're supposed to fill in, an action reducer map state, and a meta reducer state. This doesn't give us that much to go on, but this is definitely better than nothing. What we aim to do is to make our setup of the state a bit more type safe. Now, to save some time here, I have gone into and created some code that would actually match this. So let's take this code here and copy that, and let's head back into index.ts and simply replace what we're doing here. Okay, here. Now we have a bunch of things that we created, so let's try to minimize those a bit so we're just looking at one thing at a time. As for interface state, the whole idea here is to define this state and say what do you contain. So we got a product property and a product array, and the product is an interface that we need to create for the purpose. We also have an action reducer map, which is mapping simply between this type and a matching reducer. I say matching in this case because as soon as I say product array here, it expects something of the reducer in terms of what this is. So as soon as I say that this is a product array, it's going to be the happiest if this is a type array, and even happier if I say this, product array. It will work without it. The important thing is that it's generally the same shape. And of course, this is to mitigate any mistakes that we do. So at this point, if we were to switch the products reducer for the cart reducer, we'd be in a heap of trouble because it's going to say, well, I'm expecting that you operate on something product array. I'm getting an object from you, and that's definitely not the shape I am. So make it happy, switch that back to products reducer. And as you can see, the action reducer map is doing its job. It's making sure that we are coding in a way that matches reducers and its state. So that's actually how you can take this file and keep working on it. And I recommend this approach actually for most of the entities that you work with, that you set up a correct reducer, a state, and an action reducer map. This is not a thing that you have to do. It just makes the process of connecting the state and the reducer a much more safe process. We have come to the summary of this video. Initially, we showed you how tedious it could be with Redux. Because NGRX is implementing Redux, that means that all the pains, all the frustrations from Redux is going to be carried over to NGRX. Pains and the frustration consisted of that a lot of files needed to be typed out. We showed you how we needed a selector file, a reducer file, a model file, actions file, and so on. Lots of files, 4 to 5 files per entity. And you kind of see how that scales given that you have 5 or 6 entities. You're up in the vicinity of 25, 30 files. That's simply not maintainable for your fingers, right? Next step, we showed how we could install schematics, NGRX schematics. We also discussed the fact that Schematics is only able to generate code. It's not actually able to compile code. For that reason, the responsibility is on you to install whatever libraries are needed for the schematic code to work. So if you're using a schematic to generate anything store related, you would need to have the store installed. Lastly, we've shown you how to use schematics by going to the terminal and run a command. This command gave us the store import, the DevTools import, and it also showed how we could set that up. Furthermore, it also generated a boilerplate for us to keep working on. That showed us how we could set up our global state with a state and a reducer, and it also showed how we could use the action reducer map to make sure that this was indeed type safe.